Whether you are an educator, an OT, or a PT, today I'm sharing one simple way that you can work on all of your motor goals on a daily basis. We often have this misconception that movement in a classroom is kind of designated only to brain breaks, or like these short bursts of movement in between our transition times, or to help a child focus more. But if we really look at the underlayer of how movement supports development, it's a lot more than those short bursts of time. So when we want to, as educators or therapists working within daycare settings, preschools or kindergartens, and even up until the grade years, when we want to start thinking about integrating movement into our children's days, it has to be more than just those brain breaks. The other thing that's really true is that we can't just rely on recess for our children's movement time. The American Association of Pediatrics recommends that children have, from age 1 and up, at least 3 hours of movement per day. This is like the standard, what they need in order to develop all of the things that are happening within their little bodies. Now, if we look just at recess time, even if we have overall an hour and a half, it's not enough time to incorporate all of the movement needs of our children. Now, I know that often we can think, well, they have time at home as well. But if we really look down to the nitty gritty, if our children are with us in some kind of care facility or education center or school, they're with us from say 8 o'clock until 4 o'clock, or maybe even later in some cases. So if that amount of movement that they're getting during that whole daytime, the time when they're most active and most alert and ready for movement, is only say an hour or an hour and a half, it's pretty unlikely that by the time they get home, say it's 5 p.m., they're going to be doing tons of sport or tons of complex movement, maybe some, but I think if we really want to unbox our curriculum and start really looking at a holistic curriculum, we need to also think about incorporating more time of movement, more time for them to be building their muscles, building their heart muscles, but also learning all of the complex movements that they need at this age group. Some of the biggest contributors towards difficulty with learning in the grade years actually come back to the ability to learn refined movement in the younger years. So when I say younger years, I'm really talking about like up until grade 2 or 3. This is not just for our preschoolers, but these abilities to really master complex movement, they impact things like reflex integration or primitive reflex integration. They are the way that children develop their core strength muscles, which hold up their entire body, where they're critical for learning. They're also the way that our children are perfecting different eye movements as they're moving, which again, we see this coming up so much when our kids get to school and they struggle to look up at the board or copy. And also then, of course, in handwriting and scissor skills and all of these academic skills, the way that we set our children's foundation up for these academic skills is really through these complex movements. Now, this is why I love the idea, this one way that we can be really solving this problem in a school or center through gross motor groups. How do we actually get these gross motor groups out of our minds and really happening in a way that is sustainable and that can be run when therapists or educators are not necessarily present? So run by also the other staff in your center or school. There are so many different types of gross motor groups. I've done groups that are walks around the community. We've done groups that are focused on stairs. We've done groups that are focused on running. But the one that I find really sticks and happens most consistently is an obstacle course. Now, I know as soon as I said that, you're probably thinking like, oh, we have that in our gym and the kids get so bored, it's the same thing every time, it's not suitable for a classroom, we don't have big equipment. But I'm going to be showing you some tricks that you can be incorporating these obstacle courses in a really, really simple way. The first step really is to make sure that this is on the agenda. So I have tried this at different times in the day, but I find that the morning works the best. Maybe after the first initial session of the morning, whether that is like tabletops that children are rotating through, or whether it's a lesson, having just 30 minutes after that initial session is a great way to kick off the day, really get our children's circulation flowing and get they're more able to be present for learning and more able to focus. So we want to have an obstacle course scheduled for one of the morning slots of the day. And then what I really recommend you doing is having a plan. You'll see a plan that I've used something very similar to this many, many times. Because it's a diagram, it makes this be able to happen when you are not there, which is really our goal. Again, we don't want that our gross motor plans are like these well-laid plans that never happen. We've all experienced it. We want this to be something that's simple, attainable, and that we have a lot of staff buy-in as well for, again, the times that this is going to be run by any kind of support staff that you may have. So having a written plan really helps. I like to rotate these plans out every week. What this gives us the opportunity to do is really focus on specific skills. So again, all of that like boring, just doing the exact same thing every single time goes away, because now we're actually working on specific skills in our obstacle course. So if you can draw up a plan and place it on the board at the beginning of the week or some kind of central space that staff are seeing, and make sure that you're also drawing the pictures of what's there, because it just makes it so much quicker for people to start using. And I find that while it's great to have different kinds of groups, and sometimes we need to like freshen things up a little bit like that and, shake off the dust, there is something to be said about having the same consistent rhythm in terms of helping the children be ready and prepared in order to engage fully in the task, but then also helping that follow through with staff. So if every week we're completely changing the format, so we're going from an obstacle course to a traveling group to a running group, and every week it's a different thing, it can be hard to really build the environment that says what's going to be happening here, which makes it just easier for everybody to participate in. So I like to keep the same kind of flow, like the rules and how we start, how we end, how we move through the group stay the same the whole time. This might be for a year, it might be for 3 months, 6 months, depending on the age of the children, their interests, and that kind of thing. And again, if you do have something like a gross motor section in the day that's maybe a longer period of time, like gym classes or something like that, you can also just use the same format for the beginning of that time. So I want to share with you 3 of the tips that I found really make the difference in terms of, again, containing everybody, getting that staff, and for our children getting that buy-in and that flow, and making it a really fun and rich experience for everyone involved. So the first thing is to do the obstacle courses as a loop. I know often we think like every child gets one turn and then they sit down, but what we find is that as we are repeating motor patterns, the movements become more fluid and more easy for the children to understand. Often we'll also see something like a jump. Maybe we have a jump between 2 obstacles in our course, that children want to do it again, because maybe in the beginning they realized that they didn't land properly, or they wanted to try it out again. So having that like follow through, it's much easier. That does mean that we need a slightly bigger obstacle course. I would build this according to your children's abilities. So do not build a 20-piece obstacle course for 1.5-year-olds. You'll need a lot of staff to support them during that whole loop. What we're wanting to build is to the point that after they've done it, say 2 or 3 times, that they're able to complete most of that obstacle by themselves on the 3rd and 4th time. So I would generally say we're like aiming to get like 5 to 6 loops for each child to do. And the way that we do this is really by building in a lot of visual cues for our children. So what I would do firstly in terms of the actual obstacle course is we're using equipment that's in our classroom already. So we're often using things like chairs and tables and just moving them around slightly. But then what I would do is put like a bath mat or some kind of fabric that's not slippery on top of, say, a table, to indicate that this is where you have to climb on top of the table, so that children don't just like walk around, or it has like that clear visual cue on what they need to be doing. And then the other thing that we can do is clear visual cues in terms of how many times they need to do the obstacle course. So often what we've done is like lotto boards or kind of printables where they pick up one at the beginning and then they carry it through the obstacle course and then they have to stick it. So each child, gets 6, if that's how many times you want to do the loop, and they go 6 times until they've put all of their cards specifically down. You can do this also with like those circles that you put onto a stick. You can do them with balls that you throw into a pit at the end, puzzle pieces, Lego blocks, and this is a great way also to get your multidisciplinary team involved, because if there are specific, say, vocabulary goals happening, or there's a specific learning theme that your educator would like to be supporting as well, you can use that in the thing that they are carrying. So we want to always do this as a loop, then we want to, and with the loop, sorry, I should have mentioned before, but with the loop, it does mean sometimes that a child will be waiting while other people have already started. We don't want like everyone to start at the same time, because then we get a lot of traffic. Of course, that traffic through the obstacle course is also building a lot of frustration tolerance, a lot of communication skills with our children, and body boundaries, but we want to not overwhelm our children with us. Then we want to also have, like I said, those visual cues for the start and the end of the obstacle course, something that they can carry and finish, and then visual cues within the obstacle course when we're using equipment that we have around our classroom, that they can see where they should be going. And here we really want to, as we're planning our obstacle courses, be thinking about those refined movements. We're not just going up and down. Of course, this is great skills for, again, core strength, for our sensory systems that are going up and down as our children are moving, but we want to think about more complex things as well. Maybe we're trying walking backwards. Maybe we're trying to put a little box of pencils. The children have to jump over the pencil. You can put painter's tape in a line and get children to walk on the painter's tape. You can get them to walk backwards on the painter's tape as you're upgrading the level according to their age and their stage and their really where they are developmentally. But there is no need to have really fancy equipment. Often the things that we have within our classroom are more than enough. And if we have that plan that we're kind of rotating, it also gives that like spark of interest to be building new skills and more complex things for our children. Then the last tip that I found really helps is to instruct our staff that are supporting us in making this happen on one skill at a time. Especially as therapists, we have really specific ideas on how we know to handle our children and how we'll best support that muscular dynamic as they are learning things. So for example, something like jumping is often a place where there's a lot of confusion. Children are just told like jump, and there's no kind of follow through. Is this the right way to jump? Should they be jumping higher? Should they be jumping more forward? Was that a jump, or was that a throwing their body forward? So as we are working on different skills with our group, and again, we'll refer back to developmental milestones. I'll have some link below to really give us a gauge on what skills we're working on for that age group. But we want to be instructing our staff and the people that are supporting us on one skill at a time, instead of constantly correcting and saying they should do it like this, they should do it like that. Like if we're working this week on jumping, that's the thing that we're giving input and information on how to support. So for example, with jumping, I often like to start with jumping first by like holding a child's hand in front of them and jumping with them, especially if we're jumping between hoops or something like that. There are some children that you will need to support them from behind if they're maybe jumping off of something, and really supporting them at the hips. So giving that kind of information to staff with the children that you have, it's really like on the job training. It's a great way for staff development. And it's something that, again, it won't just be incorporated into this group. The next group you do when there's jumping, but your goal is actually like walking on a straight line, your staff already are well informed on how to support that. Then when they go outside to recess and a child is doing some kind of jumping, the staff is well informed on how to do that. So it has a lot of flow through. Actually, in these groups, I think that your staff learning and development is one of your main goals, alongside the children having that time of movement. So we really want to be thinking as much as we can about how to follow this through. I would love to hear how your motor groups go where you are based, whether it's a preschool, a school, a center. I would love to hear about them. Come and let me know down below. And I have a video on my screen right now, which is all about incorporating play into our learning space, which definitely uses obstacle courses and motor play as well. And I would love to see you over there.